Welcome to Ivy League Murders. I'm Sarah Alcorn.
And I'm Laura McDonald. And we want to thank everyone for tuning in.
We have a great show today, so we're going to dive right in. But first, we want to say a special thank you to my sister, Margaret, for generously contributing to the podcast.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you so much.
Yes, and to Paul Gibbons, who's totally our UK bro and really gives us wonderful feedback and has contributed. And
he's generous.
Yeah, if we ever go to England, we're going to come bug you, Paul. Okay.
And we hopefully are going to get to England. So with that, we are going to get right to the show.
So welcome back to Ivy League Murders. As you know, Laura and I just love the high-low. Our journey often takes us into both the glamorous and the seedy. And I got to say, the guest we have today floats easily between these two worlds. Peter Alson is a Harvard graduate class of 77, a professional poker player, and the author of several books. He has contributed to a number of publications, including Sports Illustrated, New York Times, Esquire, Village Voice, Rolling Stone, and many others.
He opened his own publishing company, Arbitrary Press, and reissued his first book under the new title, The Vig. He has just published his first novel, The Only Way to Play It. He is also the father to a very talented ninth grader, Eden, and we wanted to give a shout out. We're both the mother of daughters, so we want to give a shout out to Eden, who I think has published 2 books. Is that correct?
Her second book is in the editing process right now, so it'll be coming out probably this spring.
God, what a slacker.
I know.
I know.
So we wanted to give a shout out to Eden. We were very impressed by that, and we absolutely loved your book. It was hilarious. I have also read your book on Stu Younger, so I'm going to save some Stu Younger questions till the end.
Yeah, and what I loved, Peter, is that I found the characters were amazing, and you have this kind of literary lens on this very seedy world, and I love the perspective that you have on it. And you're also from a literary family, we found out. And if I may mention your uncle briefly, and he really helped to sort of mold our true crime genre. And we hate dropping names on Ivy League Murders. Norman Mailer.
I'm sorry, but the Executioner song was a major book in the formation of this true crime mind, I have to say.
Is that right? Wow.
Yes, yeah. I mean, the story of Gary Gilmore, and I mean, that's really amazing. I think of some of the books that really in the whole genre, you think of In Cold Blood, you think of the Executioner song. These are just major books in our genre. So
yeah,
a really very important book in a great writer.
And you are a great writer in your own right,
yes,
Peter. And we are very, very honored to have you.
Yes.
And introduce yourself.
Yes.
We've been talking way too long. Please tell us about yourself a bit.
Well, I mean, I think you most of it is in the books, and I mean, I have picked this genre of memoir mostly, although my new book is a novel. Yeah, I mean, I grew up in this sort of bohemian literary milieu. My father was a playwright and later the copy chief at Bantam Books. My mother was the assistant to the president of Simon & Schuster. So there was this publishing background, and then of course my uncle, and so I grew up. I mean, the thing is that as I was growing up, the last thing in the world I wanted to do was join the family business. And so, like many young boys, I dreamed of becoming a professional athlete. And I actually had some talent at tennis, but probably started too late for that to become a reality. I didn't start playing seriously until I was 15. And I think in the tennis world, if you want to get a jump, you have to start earlier than that. But I was always very competitive, and so I channeled that competitiveness into things like poker, and which I've started playing poker when I was 10 years old. On my dad's knee, he had a game with his theater cronies, including two of the people who participated in Tootsie. One of the writers, Murray Shiskow, and Dustin Hoffman. When I was 10 years old, I played in one of these poker games with Dustin Hoffman. I lost more money than I had, so I ended up paying him off in fish that I had caught earlier that day.
Oh my God,
That's great.
Oh, I love that. And so I'm just intrigued because you went to Harvard and you chose this line of work, and and so sort of before we begin, okay, I have to admit, like I'm kind of like a bookie virgin. I mean, and I maybe some of our listeners are too.
Literally, she's literally a bookie.
Yes. Laura had a bookie, which I have to say my respect for her went way up when I heard that.
In New York City.
I'm a PI. I've never had a bookie case. I've had a RICO cases, racketeering cases. I get the general idea, but for our listeners and maybe for someone like myself, can you kind of just lay out what a bookie does?
Yeah, so bookies take bets, and the way they make their money is with what is called the VIG, which is the title of my book. That it was, in fact, the original title. Although when the book came out in 1996, my publisher persuaded me to call it Confessions of an Ivy League Bookie. They thought it would be more commercial, but the VIG is the 10% fee that bookies attach to all losing bets. A winning bet has nothing, has no tax on it, but a losing bet does. Since cavemen, people have have wanted to bet on the outcome of events with uncertain outcomes, and so the bookie is the person who fulfills that role.
So you find yourself, just to kind of get into the book a little bit, you find yourself in your early 30s, kind of without, you're a writer, kind of without work, trying to freelance, kind of out of a relationship. We've all been there, just kind of, and you're not really maybe living up to your degree, and you kind of fall into being a bookie, which seems, people say, how do you fall into being a bookie? So maybe you could kind of say how you fall into being a bookie.
Yeah, well, I mean, as I say, I wasn't unacquainted with the gambling world.
Right.
And there is a gambling gene in our family. So my grandfather was a compulsive gambler. I don't consider myself a compulsive gambler. I like games of chance, but only where I have an edge. Whereas my grandfather somehow seemed to take pleasure in games where he was operating at a deficit. So that was what appealed to me about poker, is that was a game where skill is a large component. Of course, there is a luck component. So I mean, I was, as you say, at a low point in my life, and I did stumble into this this situation where the son of a friend of mine was working as a bookie, and he gave me a ride up to her place in Sag Harbor, and I was fascinated by what he was doing, and so at a few days later he called me up and asked me if I wanted to take part. And since I had nothing else going on at the time, it seemed like there was no reason not to do it. And but I will say that I was sort of in a desperate place. I was not, how, how do I say, living up to my promise. So in some ways, there was a certain amount of self-loathing involved, and a way of sort of punishing myself for not living up to my promise. Yeah, why not? I'll get involved in something that is not legal and not very reputable.
But was there a part of you, or I sort of feel like I picked this up from the book, where you thought about, okay, how would I write about this, or or was it purely like, I need to make money? And
so initially it was purely, I need to make money, and also, I mean, I will say that I've always been fascinated by the seamy underside of things. One of my favorite novels in college was Day of the Locust, and I just, I've always liked the dark side of things. So there was that. And then once I started doing it, and I would walk to work, and I would walk along St. Mark's Place, and I actually had a friend who lived en route, and either on the way there or on the way back after a shift, I would stop in to his place, and he's a fellow writer, guy named Legs McNeil. And
I've actually met him.
Have you? Oh,
yes, I have. Yes, and
yeah. So anyway, I mean, I started telling Legs about what was going on in this bookmaking office, and he was like, "Man, you have got to start taking notes, and you need to write about this." And I was like, "Yeah, maybe he's right." I mean, it's funny, as a writer, you would think that would be the first thing you would be thinking about. But I really wasn't. I mean, I was, as I say, I was in a bad place, and I was just trying to sort of, put one foot in front of the other.
And I love some of the characters that you come across. Can you because I think your lens that you see them from, I don't think there's any irony that where they don't see themselves in the same sort of ironic way. But yeah, sorry.
I was just going to say, let's paint a picture for people who haven't read the book, that you start working in this kind of backroom establishment, and you're answering the phones. And I guess I related because I at one point had a bookie, and I used to have to call and give a code word. So I used to bet the Bruins. So I used to have to call and give a code word. And, so it's kind of funny. So people would call and give a code word, and you are taking these calls in this kind of backroom establishment. And it had kind of like a locker room fraternal type of feeling, with all of you guys sitting around kind of giving each other shit and just you really got this real testosterone vibe.
Yeah.
And everyone had these, all these funny names, like, I called him Prozac Pat. I mean, you know what I mean? You just have all these kind of, names of these guys, and Steak Knife and all these, and
Monkey.
Monkey. And I mean, I just thought it was
Spanky.
Spanky. So maybe you could tell us a little about all the characters you kind of interacted with. And I did sense that attraction, and I was attracted to that. I was very attracted to that.
Well, I was very attracted to it. At the same time, it was sort of the opposite of glamorous. So the office was actually in the East Village apartment of a character I called Krause in the book.
Yeah, he was disgusting.
he was. I mean, he was sort of a sad sack, former aspiring actor who when he was renting out part of his apartment to the bookies, and they were paying him several $100s a month. And he would rarely emerge from what we called his cave, which was his bedroom. But when he did, he came out, and he was, in his skivvies and unshaven and otherwise unbathed. and he was a character, and then the guys themselves, some of them were old school bookies, who Monkey and Pat, and these were, in a sense, them those guys, but there were also the younger guys who were like me, Ivy educated. One of them had gone to Columbia, another had gone to Cornell, and there was this collision of cultures in the room, between the old school way of doing things. I mean, this was right on the cusp of these great societal changes with the internet and cell phones. And so we were still using rotary dial-up phones in this office. And, to set the scene, we were in this living room with its Salvation Army furniture. And it was in a state of disarray. And there we were sitting at a table underneath a fluorescent lamp, with ashtrays full of cigarette butts, and the room full of smoke, and 10 rotary phones all tied into a system that kicked one call to the next line, and we would sit there for 2 hours during an afternoon and take the bets from the people calling in. And even though we were working in this sort of decrepit space, the amount of action that we were taking on a big football weekend, we were taking $3 million worth of bets. Wow. So there was this very odd dissonance between where we were and the kind of money that was involved. And the guys were hilarious, and it really was like a fraternity, in that they looked at me and I was the new pledge, and so they were going to bust my chops at every turn, and especially the old school guys.
Yeah.
So it was.
Can you describe, can you give us an example of that?
Of the chop busting? Well, I mean, the thing is, there I was, this Harvard guy, and despite my having been a poker player and knowing a little bit about sports betting, I didn't know the fine points of how the line worked, and how all the sort of betting essentials. And so in teaching me these things, they just were merciless about teasing me about the fact that I'd gone to Harvard, and yet I couldn't understand these very simple betting principles.
So there are some great terms that come up too, in terms of bookie terms, like can you describe some of these things that you learn, like what's a nickel and a dime and a sharp, and
Right, exactly. So a nickel is term for $500. A dime is $1,000. There's sharp guys and suckers. Suckers are just ordinary people who bet on games, and those are the most desired players for a bookie. But the sharp guys are the professional gamblers who actually have either inside information, or there was the computer gang who were sort of at the forefront of analyzing sports teams using analytical data, and they would get an edge on the line. The line was made in Las Vegas by a guy named Roxy Roxborough at the Stardust at that time. And the line, it was very interesting to me that the line was not necessarily designed to accurately assess which team was 5 points better than another team, but rather to assess what the betting public believed was the difference in the game. And so they actually would favor, if they thought a team was a 7-point favorite, but the public saw that team as a 9-point favorite, they might actually put the line at 9 points. And that gave us a space for the professional gamblers to go the other way using the actual projected differential in the game, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting. I have to say, one of my favorite parts of your colleagues was the office pool about who was going to die first.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the interesting thing is that, and sadly, most of those guys that I worked with are dead.
I know. I saw. I mean, I don't want to like be a spoiler alert, but I did see that. But I just thought that was funny when you're just like, oh, we had an office poll to see who was going to drop dead first.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I went to some monkey died back in the day, and we all went to his funeral, and the rabbi who did his eulogy said about him, monkey who loved sports and the uncertainty of their outcome.
Yes. Yeah.
I just thought that was hilarious.
So there comes a point in all of in all of this where there's a dramatic police bust.
Yeah.
And so obviously to go from Harvard to lockup is quite a shock. So maybe you could talk a little bit about, and you talk about that obviously in the book, the shock of being handcuffed and put in central booking and how that affected you.
But also like, or maybe is it giving away too much to say how that happened? Or, I mean, if we want to, I don't know, like what led up to that, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was sort of an inevitability. And so.
I mean, were you afraid of that? I mean, we didn't really talk about the fear. Like, were you afraid of that working there? I mean, what was or was that part of the excitement? Because there were other busts happening as you're doing this. You're watching other people get busted. So you didn't know it was.
Yeah. I mean, we knew that, and as a way of sort of staying ahead of it, the office moved several times during my time there. But there was a feeling of inevitability that it would happen at some point. And of course, while it may have been, there may have been a little bit of excitement thinking about it, mostly there was dread.
Right.
And when it did actually happen, it was shocking because they break the door down. They use a battering ram and they come in with guns drawn. And, I mean, there we are, we're hardly dangerous. But I don't know if you've ever been at the end of a gunpoint. It's just not a pleasant feeling. And they're also the cops who bust in, they don't know what they're coming into. And so they're sort of overly excited.
Right.
Yeah.
And that is nervous making. And then once in the Brooklyn House of Detention and then put in, I had no idea how grim it really is in a place like that. And the kind of characters who are in there who, my overriding feeling was one of shame, that I had been afforded privileges that none of the other people in there with me had been. And, this feeling of having somehow squandered those privileges. And so it was humbling. And it definitely, after the bust and in the aftermath of it, I was pretty sure I was never going to go back to doing that again. Despite the fact that all of my compadres were certain that I would come back and that they were all going to go back, and in fact they did, although in a different form, because, as I say, there was this clash of cultures between the old bookies and the new bookies, and the whole bookie scene was changing. And so when they did reopen, it was not in a East Village tenement. It was on Margarita Island, off the coast of Venezuela,
Yes.
and using 800 numbers and the internet.
That does sound a little more pleasant, I have to say, as a working environment than than a flop house in the East. East
Yeah,
Village.
yeah. No, I think so.
Yeah,
and of course
it takes away.
they wanted me to join them there, but I really had very little interest in. And of course, by then I had also started writing the book, and the book was for me transformative in my writing career, because it was my first published book, and certainly paved the way for subsequent books.
So when you were, was your family aware that you were a bookie, or what was your? I love your jobs you can't tell your mom about.
Yeah.
So
So my mom, even after my book came out, was sure that it was fiction, and
Only a mom.
Yeah, you gotta love mom. And the funny thing is that at one point after the book came out, there was I don't know if you remember this supermarket publication, the National Examiner.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. So
I get all my good news from National.
They did an article called "Harvard's Crop of Dirty Rotten Apples," and so I was in there amongst Ted Kaczynski, a guy who had ripped off a children's cancer charity, and my only feeling about it when I saw it was, oh, mom is going to be so proud.
I hope you framed that.
I know.
I
Oh
mean,
my God.
that's like a collector's piece.
I'm jealous.
I know.
Really?
I don't know. I'm sure I have it somewhere, but it's probably buried deep in a box.
I mean, we just had the guys from the Ivy League Monsters on, and
I listened to
weren't
that.
Represented there.
Yeah.
No, that was unbelievable. I can't believe that woman, Bishop.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
She's one of our ladies.
I was just going to say, so you would think you get busted for this and you just say, that's it. I'm going to turn away from poker and live this clean life and never play cards again. But that's not what happened.
No, that's not what happened.
Not at all.
Yeah. No, I mean, I as I say, I've always been attracted to both the seamy underside and to there is this gambling gene. So I kept playing poker after that. I had been playing poker right along, and for a while I was I wouldn't call myself a true professional poker player, because I was also making money off of writing, but I was semi-professional. There were periods where I was making more money playing poker than I was off of my writing.
Wow.
And what's a bigger gamble, Peter?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I don't think that, especially now where publishing is in such a precarious state, I don't think it would be unfair to characterize poker as a surer bet.
I just, we at Ivy League Murders, we always sort of talk about, like, are murderers born? Are they made? But do you think poker players are born, or are they made? Or, I just
Sarah was asking, she said, I wonder if I tried hard enough if I could become a great, because I'm actually a very good blackjack player. I played once 11 nights in Vegas, which I consider a great feat to play 11
Yeah.
nights just for an amateur. And but I practiced a lot and I studied it a lot. And so me and Sarah were talking about whether you're born a great player, or can you really, do you think you can study poker enough?
Yeah, because for me, I have to get my friends drunk enough so that I can win. That's really what that's what has to happen.
It's interesting. There's actually a book out now by Maria Konnikova, who is a New Yorker writer who is also fascinated with both things sort of slightly seamy, con men, etc., but also mostly from the psychological aspect of it. And she decided to actually find out whether one could become a poker player, and so she apprenticed herself to one of the world's best poker players, a guy named Eric Seidel, and she actually went on to win a WPT poker tournament.
No kidding.
So I guess the answer is, you can. You don't have to come by it naturally, but it certainly helps if you have both an aptitude for math and psychology, and for risk.
Sure.
Yeah.
And you obviously have to have a lot of emotional control to make sure that your opponents don't know what your tells are, that type of thing.
Even more so for the bad things that happen, for the unlucky things that happen. So to keep yourself from coming unglued or unhinged when things go badly. And in poker, you find out a lot about luck and how luck can that variance can mean that an event where you're supposed to win 2 out of 3 times, you could actually lose 10 times in a row. And when that happens, it can be very destabilizing.
Sure.
And so your ability to sort of maintain your sang-froid and your composure in situations like that is a great component of how you do as a poker player. So you can be incredibly skilled, and yet if you don't have that capability of maintaining your balance, there are players I've played against who are great players technically and in terms of their understanding of the game, but a couple of bad things happen to them, and it all goes out the window, and they undo everything good that they had done through their skill.
As in life, as in poker.
As in life, as in poker. Yeah, absolutely.
And do you think with the electronics and the internet that there's really an element of all of this being lost, to playing everything electronically, to betting electronically?
I mean, there's apps now that kind of do
because
what
I just
bookies
think
do,
about
right?
even gambling and going to games and going to Vegas and just that whole excitement. And I mean, I know you can't smoke anymore, but the smoke-filled rooms.
It's kind of like the glamorous, the sleazy,
it's just like that whole environment to me. It's just because I'm very attracted to that. It's just so fabulous, and it's like just seems like now everything is kind of like you can just do it all online, and you don't really even need to do that anymore.
That's very true, and for me, that's part of the romance of it that's been lost. And and that's true in almost everything with data analysis, and and think about book publishing, where in the old days there was really no way of understanding what happened with a book, and now they know down to the decimal point. And so what that does is it makes it all sort of very scientific and bloodless.
Yeah.
And I think,
Sanitized almost. It seems
yeah,
like.
yeah, and
Yeah.
a lot is lost through that. I think in some ways, too much information is a bad thing.
I love in the book too that one of the guys you worked with then went on to Wall Street. And so what did they say comparing being a bookie to working on Wall Street?
Yeah. So he didn't actually go straight to Wall Street, or it's not a direct line to Wall Street. What he did was he went into he started a biotechnology company, and he's made an incredible amount of money at it. But he says that that the bookie world was much more straightforward and honorable
Oh yeah.
than it is in the world of tech and finance.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I can't have you here without bending your ear about my mild obsession with Stewie Younger. So
Yeah.
So I don't know if people don't know who Stewie Younger is, they should definitely look up Stewie Younger. They should definitely read your book on Stewie Younger.
Which is called
One of a Kind.
One of a
One of a
Kind.
Kind.
And
Yeah.
I mean, I read it and like I actually it's on audio book. It's actually free on Audible right now.
Oh, is that right? Wow.
Yes, I don't know if is that bad to say.
No,
It's bad to say. But it's free on Audible and I listened to it in like a day. But I'm fascinated by him. So for anyone who doesn't know, he's kind of a Lower East Side New York poker phenomenon that you wrote about.
Yeah.
And who was really just like a poker gin prodigy.
Yeah.
And I would just encourage anybody to, I mean, I don't even know what to say about him. I mean, it's kind of a tragedy, his story, but I mean, he would just be someone I would say was just innately good at cards.
He was, I mean, he was a card genius, really. And he had, there is no such thing as a photographic memory, but he had a near photographic memory. One of the things that he could do was he could count down 6 decks. So in other words, you would turn over one card after another, 6 decks of cards stacked on top of each other, and you get to the last card, and he could tell you what it was.
Unbelievable.
Oh, wow.
Which is
phenomenal.
But the
phenomenal.
tragedy of Stewie Younger was that he was a compulsive gambler. So he would then go bet sports, which
Right.
he had no skill at.
Right.
That's
So
right.
then he would bet sports, which he was terrible at, and lose all of his money. And he was a drug addict. But
That's right. He made $30 million playing poker during his life, and he died alone in a motel room.
Right.
He was a cocaine addict. He died with $800 in his pocket, and that was all he had to his name at that point.
God.
But there's actually a scene in the book which is so striking where walks into a room and nobody will front him the money.
That's right.
He looks homeless. And he goes away, goes on a run, and comes back and wins. I mean, it's like it's just so. I mean, anyone who has any interest in poker should. I've been interested in him for a long time. I used to live near the Lower East Side, and so when he was alive, I was interested in him. And anyone who's interested, there's also a movie about him, not a great movie, but it's if anyone who's interested in about him should read your book. And I'm going to put the link up on Facebook because I think it's just really, really fascinating. And if you're interested in poker, it really kind of really draws you in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we should probably wrap this up.
Yeah,
but we could like keep you on.
Yeah, you're like really one of those people where you're like the most interesting man in the world.
I really think though, Laura, why don't you place a fake bet to Peter right now? I want to hear the lingo. You know what I mean? I want to hear the I want to
honestly.
Yeah, I want a 20% spread on
My parents are going to be like, they're going to be kind of pissed when they
Peter
find out I had a bookie.
Okay, Peter, 3 dimes. Okay.
No, that's
three dimes.
I was a lightweight better. I was.
So first you would say, this is card player for Moondog. I want 3 dimes on the Giants -7.
Okay.
And that would be you're identifying who you are, who has your sheet, who is your agent. So you are card player. Your agent is Moondog. You're betting $3,000 on the Giants minus 7 points.
Wow.
So you must be like the coolest dad at school.
If they only knew.
I used to pick up kids at Grace Church School, so I'm like definitely thinking you've got to be the coolest dad.
It's funny too. As a Harvard grad, I think we talked about this before. I thought I had an edgy job being a private investigator, and I tell you, you definitely beat me out big time.
You guys have to be fun at the reunions when everyone else is like a banker and a lawyer. And
no, I think we're just, again, it's like jobs you don't tell your mom about.
Exactly.
That's
I think it's what we need to have a book called The Black Sheeps of Harvard. That would be kind of a fun compilation.
Yeah, Ivy League Black Sheeps.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, this has been absolutely a blast. I think that our listeners are going to really love these books.